He walked in carrying a backpack so heavy it left marks on his shoulders. The dealership laughed, until the boy pointed to a car no one had touched in years. He wasn't there for speed or style. He wanted something everyone else forgot. And when he dumped a pile of coins onto the front desk, what happened next silenced the entire building. What made the dealership owner freeze, walk out, and hand over the keys without saying a word? What did this boy really come to buy? Mason walked in alone. His sneakers were old, his jeans worn at the knees, and his backpack looked like it was filled with bricks. The moment he stepped through the gleaming glass doors of the luxury dealership, every head turned. The scent of leather and fresh polish filled the air. Grown men in suits leaned against shiny sports cars, chatting with salesmen in watches that cost more than Mason's entire town. He didn't belong there, and everyone could see it. A receptionist at the front desk raised an eyebrow as Mason slowly made his way inside. She whispered something to a nearby sales associate, and they both laughed. But Mason didn't flinch. He kept walking until he reached the main showroom, where dozens of high-end vehicles sparkled under showroom lights. Then he stopped and looked toward the back, where one dusty, older car sat under a thin layer of grime. Unlike the others, it wasn't on a platform. No spotlight, no polish. It looked forgotten. A young salesman strutted over and chuckled. "Hey, kid. You lost. This ain't a candy store." Mason didn't respond. Instead, he set his backpack on the floor with a loud metallic clank. The sound made everyone in the showroom look over. He unzipped it and began pulling out Ziploc bags, full of coins. Pennies, nickels, dimes. The staff stared in disbelief. "You gotta be kidding me," one of them muttered. "Is this some kind of prank?" Mason said nothing. He pointed to the dusty car in the corner and said, "I want that one." The laughter started immediately. Phones came out. Some people started recording. "This is gold," someone whispered. "TikTok's gonna love this." The receptionist smirked and walked over. "That car isn't even for sale, sweetheart," she said mockingly. "It's junk. Now pick up your coins before someone trips." But Mason didn't move. He just kept staring at the car, not with excitement or desire, but with something deeper, something heavier. There was pain in his eyes, a memory no one else in the room could see. He whispered, "That car used to belong to someone important." The staff exchanged glances. One of the salesmen rolled his eyes. "All right, buddy. That's enough. Time to go." As he reached to grab the boy's arm, the room suddenly grew quiet. A sharp voice cut through the laughter. "Wait." Everyone turned to see an older man in a charcoal suit stepping down from the office on the second floor. His presence was commanding. His voice was calm but firm. "Let him speak," the man said. The employees straightened up, some suddenly nervous. One of them leaned toward the receptionist and whispered, "That's Mr. Delaney, the owner." Mason looked up, eyes wide. The owner walked slowly toward the coins on the floor, then glanced at the dusty car. His expression changed. He recognized something. But what? And why did the look in the boy's eyes shake him so deeply? The room was still. The laughter had stopped, and all eyes were on the boy and the man who had just spoken. Mason shifted his weight, unsure whether he should speak or run. The coins at his feet glinted under the overhead lights like fallen treasure, but to him, they were much more than money. They were memories. Mr. Delaney, the dealership's owner, gave the boy a small nod. "What's your name?" he asked. Mason hesitated, then answered, "Mason Carter." The name didn't mean anything to the staff, but Mr. Delaney's brow twitched slightly. He gestured to a nearby couch. "Come sit with me, Mason." The boy followed, his steps unsure. The other employees exchanged looks, some clearly irritated that the boss was wasting time on a child with a sack of loose change. But Mr. Delaney wasn't watching them. He was watching Mason. "Tell me why you want that car," he said quietly. And so, Mason did. It started 1 year ago. Mason's father, Eric Carter, was a mechanic, well known in their small town, but not rich or famous. He wasn't the kind of man who drew attention. But to Mason, he was everything. They didn't have much money, but his dad made every moment feel like an adventure. Sundays were for long drives on empty country roads, always in that same old car, the one now sitting dusty and forgotten at the back of this dealership. It wasn't much to look at, just a faded red sedan with a dent in the fender and a crack in the side mirror. But to Mason, it was magic. That car held his best memories. Music playing through broken speakers. Laughter bouncing off the windows. The smell of engine oil and cinnamon gum. The last real family time before everything changed. A drunk driver. A rainy night. Flashing lights. That's how Mason lost his dad. The car was totaled, or so they were told. It disappeared after the accident. The insurance company said it was scrapped. But Mason didn't believe it. He searched online, checked salvage listings, junkyards, everything he could think of. His mother told him to let it go, but he couldn't. Then one day, 6 months ago, he saw a blurry photo online of a car parked in the back of a dealership. A familiar shape, a familiar dent in the fender. He zoomed in on the image over and over. It was the same car. Somehow, it had ended up here. He called the dealership, asked if the car was for sale. The woman on the phone laughed and said it wasn't worth anyone's time. It's not even listed, she said. That thing's junk. But to Mason, it was priceless. He made a decision. From that day on, Mason worked every spare hour he could find. He mowed lawns. He swept driveways. He helped elderly neighbors carry groceries, walked dogs, cleaned gutters, raked leaves. People started to recognize him. A few offered him extra tips when they heard what he was doing. They'd ask, "Why a car?" And he'd just say, "It belonged to my dad." No one understood. It wasn't about driving. He didn't even have a license. It was about keeping something real. Holding on to something that didn't die with his father. He saved every coin he earned. Rolled them in paper sleeves. Counted them every night. There were times he wanted to give up. Times he cried himself to sleep. But each morning, he'd look at the picture of his dad on the dashboard of a toy car he kept beside his bed, and start again. When he thought he had enough, Mason called the dealership again. This time, he didn't ask questions. He just packed his coins into his school backpack and made the trip across town. He walked for almost 2 hours. His shoulders burned from the weight, but he didn't stop. When he finally walked into the dealership, he was scared, but ready. He didn't care about the stares. He didn't care about the laughter. He didn't care that they didn't believe him. He was here for one thing, and he wouldn't leave without at least trying. "That car is the last piece of my dad I have left," Mason whispered. "I don't care if it doesn't run. I don't care if it's broken. I just want it back." Mr. Delaney leaned forward slowly. His face was unreadable, but his hands were clenched. A long pause filled the air. Finally, the older man turned to look at the car again. And when he did, something in his expression cracked. Something long buried began to surface. The silence didn't last long. As soon as Mason finished speaking, the spell was broken by a scoff from the floor manager. "Sir, with all due respect, we've got real customers waiting," he said to Mr. Delaney. "This isn't a daycare." The receptionist smirked and added, "And this kid just dumped coins all over our floor. It's a mess." Another salesman chimed in, "Come on, Mr. Delaney, it's a cute story, but the car isn't worth anything. It won't even start. It's been collecting dust for years." Mason looked down, his face turning red. He had known they wouldn't understand, but the sting of their words still hit hard. He bent down and began picking up the coins in silence, bag by bag, trying not to let the tears show. Each coin felt heavier now, not because of the weight, but because of the shame they tried to throw on him. He had hoped his story would change their minds, but all it did was give them more reason to laugh. "Let's just call security and have him escorted out," someone muttered, not even trying to lower their voice. One of the guards, who had been leaning against the back wall, started walking forward. Mason froze. He could hear the whispers, the mocking laughs. A customer watching from the side took out her phone and began filming again. "Little hustler tries to buy a car with coins," she said under her breath. Mason didn't look up. He just clutched the Ziploc bag to his chest and waited for someone to grab him. That's when the unexpected happened. Mr. Delaney raised his hand. "Stop," The guard halted mid-step. The staff all turned, confused. "What is it now?" one of the salesmen asked. The owner walked forward and picked up one of the coin bags Mason had dropped. He looked at it for a long second, then turned to the staff. "You all think this is funny?" he asked, his voice calm but sharp. "You think this is some joke?" No one answered. "Do you even hear yourselves?" The room went quiet again, but this time the tension was different. Mr. Delaney didn't yell. He didn't raise his voice. But his words cut through the air like glass. "This boy came in here with more courage than any of you have probably shown in your lives. He worked for a year to earn this money. He didn't come begging. He didn't lie. He came to buy something that mattered to him. And all you did was laugh." Mason looked up, eyes wide. The owner glanced back down at the coin bag, then at the dusty car in the back. "You said that car's worthless," he said. "Maybe to you. But not to him." The staff looked at one another, unsure how to respond. "Let me ask you something," Mr. Delaney continued, turning back to Mason. "Why didn't you just give up?" The boy's voice was quiet but steady. "Because it's the only part of my dad that's still real. Everything else is gone. Our house, his garage, even his tools. But that car. I remember sitting in the passenger seat. Just him and me. I can still smell his cologne in the fabric. I can still hear his laugh when the horn got stuck. If I let that car go, I let him go too." His voice cracked at the end, but he didn't cry. He stood there holding the bag of coins like a soldier guarding something sacred. Mr. Delaney looked like he had been hit with a brick. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then something strange happened. The owner reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an old, faded wallet. He opened it carefully and took out a small photo. He stared at it for a few seconds, then handed it to Mason. The boy looked down and gasped. It was a picture of his father, standing next to a younger Mr. Delaney in front of the very same car, both of them smiling. "Your dad saved my life once," the owner said, his voice now thick with emotion. "He pulled me out of a burning garage. I never forgot that." The employees looked stunned. The receptionist dropped her notepad. The customers stopped filming. The entire room seemed to freeze in time. Mason clutched the photo like it was made of glass. He looked back up at the man in front of him, realizing that this wasn't just a business owner. This was someone who had known his father, who had been part of a past Mason only heard about in stories. Mr. Delaney took a deep breath. "Get that car cleaned," he said to the floor manager. "Now." The man hesitated, but one look from the owner made him move. "Yes, sir," he said, signaling to the crew in the back. Mason watched as two workers walked over to the dusty vehicle and began wiping it down. One of them shook his head and said, "I had no idea." The other just nodded. The laughter was gone. The smirks were gone. All that remained was silence and the soft sound of rags wiping dust away from metal. Mr. Delaney turned to Mason. "You said you brought coins," he said gently. Mason nodded. "Let's count them together," the owner said. "And then we'll see about giving you the keys." Mr. Delaney led Mason to a small glass office off the main floor. It was quiet in there, far from the noise and whispers still buzzing around the showroom. Mason sat on a leather chair, still holding the photo of his father. His hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the rush of emotions he had tried so hard to hold back. Mr. Delaney didn't speak right away. He took a seat across from the boy, set the coin bag on the table between them, and folded his hands. The air felt heavy. The weight of memory filled the space between them. Mason kept glancing at the picture, as if afraid it would vanish if he looked away for too long. Finally, Mr. Delaney spoke. "You said you don't care if the car runs," he said softly. Mason nodded. "Why?" The boy looked up. "Because it's not about driving. I just want to sit in it. Smell the old seat. Hear the door creak. It's like, if I can touch that car, I can be near him again. Just for a minute." The owner looked down at the photo in Mason's hand. "You know," he said slowly, "your dad used to say the same thing about his old man's truck. Said it smelled like pipe smoke and hard work." He smiled faintly. "Funny how some things stick to metal." Mason didn't say anything, but his eyes said enough. After a moment, Mr. Delaney stood and walked to a small cabinet in the corner of the office. He opened it and pulled out a small, battered cash-counting machine. He set it on the desk, plugged it in, and turned to Mason. "Let's count these coins," he said. One by one, Mason handed him the bags, and together they sorted them. Quarters, dimes, nickels, pennies. Mr. Delaney worked with quiet focus, never rushing, never mocking. It took a long time. The machine clicked and whirred, counting each pile. Mason's eyes followed every number. At the end, the total came up on a screen. It wasn't much. Certainly not enough to buy any car in the showroom. But that wasn't the point. Mr. Delaney looked at the number, then back at Mason. "You saved all this?" Mason nodded. "Every penny," he said. "Since the day I found the photo of the car." The owner leaned back in his chair. "What if I told you the car isn't worth a tenth of what you brought?" Mason blinked. "What?" The owner shrugged. "It's a wreck. No engine. No tires worth keeping. It's probably headed for the scrapyard. Legally, I couldn't even sell it to you unless we do paperwork. And honestly, it's more work than it's worth." Mason's shoulders slumped. He looked down at his hands, ashamed again. But before the sting could settle, Mr. Delaney leaned forward. "But what if I told you there's another way?" Mason looked up slowly. "A test," the owner said. "Not about money. About who you are." He stood and walked over to a wall lined with keys. Hundreds of them, all labeled and sorted by make and model. He reached for a small black key with a red ribbon tied to the end. Mason's heart skipped. He had seen that ribbon before. In one of the photos his mom kept in an old album. That same key used to hang in their garage. Mr. Delaney returned to the desk and placed the key in front of Mason. "This is the original," he said. "Your dad gave it to me the night he saved my life. Told me to hold on to it in case I ever needed a reminder of who I owed." Mason stared at it like it was glowing. "I never used it," the owner went on. "But I think it's time someone did." Mason reached for the key, but Mr. Delaney stopped him. "First, the test." The boy froze. "What kind of test?" The owner looked serious now. "You want that car. Fine. But I want to know something first. If I gave you the chance to walk away right now, with all your coins back and no one mocking you, would you take it?" Mason's face wrinkled in confusion. "Why?" Mr. Delaney's voice grew quieter. "Because sometimes, walking away feels safer than being disappointed again. I need to know that you're ready for what comes with holding on to something that might not live up to the memory." Mason didn't even pause. "I won't walk away. I've come too far. Even if the car falls apart the moment I touch it, I still need to see it. I need to feel it. Because my dad touched that wheel. He sat in that seat. That means something." The owner nodded slowly. Then he stood, took the key, and walked toward the showroom. Mason followed. The whole room was still. Customers had stopped talking. Staff stepped aside. They watched as Mr. Delaney walked toward the old car and opened the door. Dust flew into the air. Mason stood behind him, heart racing. Mr. Delaney turned to the boy and held out the key. "Test passed," he said. "Now let's see what memory smells like." The entire dealership seemed to hold its breath as Mr. Delaney placed the key in Mason's hand. The boy's fingers curled around it slowly, like he was afraid the moment would disappear. The key felt heavier than he expected, not in weight, but in meaning. With a nod from Mr. Delaney, Mason stepped forward. The car hadn't moved in years. Dust clung to its edges, the windshield fogged from years of silence. Still, it looked exactly like he remembered. Every dent, every scratch. This wasn't just a car to him, it was the last chapter of a book he'd never been able to finish. He reached for the door handle and gave it a gentle tug. It creaked open, just like it used to when his dad would pick him up from school. He climbed inside and closed the door behind him. For a moment, everything went still. The inside of the car was worn and faded, but it was all there. The cracked dashboard. The tear in the passenger seat. The faint, lingering smell of motor oil and cinnamon. Mason pressed his hand to the steering wheel. His voice was barely a whisper. Dad. Mr. Delaney stayed by the driver's side, watching carefully. His face was calm, but his eyes were clouded with memory. That car, he said, was more than just a ride. It was your dad's dream. He used to talk about restoring it. Said one day he'd pass it down to you. Mason turned slowly. He said that. The owner nodded. Your father and I were friends once. Long before the accident. He was working on that car when I hired him to fix up my personal garage. He told me about his son. Told me he wanted you to have something real. Something built with his hands. Mason looked down at the cracked steering wheel, trying to imagine what it must have been like for his dad to sit here with that dream in his heart. But after he died, Mr. Delaney continued, the car ended up in a city impound lot. It was badly damaged. The garage where he kept it closed down. No one claimed it. It bounced from place to place until it landed here. I didn't recognize it right away. Not until today. Mason touched the photo still in his pocket. His fingers trembled. I thought it was gone forever. Mr. Delaney leaned against the open door. So did I. Until I saw you walk in carrying a backpack full of coins. Most people come in here flashing credit cards and talking about horsepower. But you came with something else, memory, love, purpose. The staff had gathered nearby, no longer mocking, no longer smirking. Some of them looked away, ashamed. Others just watched in silence. One of the mechanics who had been wiping down the car earlier stepped forward and opened the hood. Sir, he said softly to Mr. Delaney, you might want to see this. Together, they lifted the hood. Dust billowed out, revealing a rusted engine barely held together. But something glinted in the corner. A small metal plate, bolted to the inside frame. Mason stepped closer and squinted. Etched into the metal were the initials EC followed by the words for Mason, one day. His breath caught in his throat. He reached out to touch the plate with shaky fingers. He really did want me to have it, he whispered. Mr. Delaney nodded, blinking back tears. He did. He just never got the chance to finish what he started. The message had been hidden all these years, sitting in the dark, waiting for the right moment to be seen. Mason's knees buckled and he sat back in the seat, overwhelmed. I thought I was crazy for chasing this, he said. Everyone said it was a waste of time. The owner placed a hand on the roof of the car. Sometimes the things people call crazy are the only things that matter. You didn't just save up coins. You kept your father's dream alive. You honored him in a way money never could. From the crowd, someone began to clap. Slowly, more joined. Not loud. Not showy. Just a quiet ripple of respect. Even the guard who had almost thrown Mason out earlier stood with his arms crossed, head slightly bowed. The receptionist wiped her eyes. The smug expressions were gone, replaced with a strange kind of awe. Mr. Delaney raised a hand and the clapping stopped. He looked at Mason and said, "This car doesn't belong in a showroom. It belongs with you." Mason looked confused. "But I haven't finished paying. I still owe more. I don't have enough." The owner shook his head. "You already paid more than anyone else ever could." He reached into his coat, pulled out a document, and placed it on the hood. "Sign here. It's yours." The pen in Mason's hand shook as he scribbled his name. His heart was pounding. He couldn't believe what was happening. When it was done, Mr. Delaney handed him a small envelope. Inside was a certificate. Not just of ownership, but something else. A handwritten note. "For Mason, your dad would be proud. Now make your own road." Mason held it tight, his eyes wet but full of something brighter than sadness. Something like peace. The truth had been waiting for him, not just the car, but the message, the hidden history, the legacy buried beneath dust and doubt. In that moment, every bag of coins, every blister from a rake, every long walk in the heat, it was all worth it. Because he hadn't just found the car. He had found the missing piece of his father. The moment Mason stepped out of the car with the keys in his hand, the world around him felt different. It wasn't louder or brighter, It was just real. More real than anything had felt in a long time. The old car stood behind him like a memory brought back to life, still dusty, still dented, but now filled with something money couldn't buy. The employees stood in a quiet circle, watching him not as a joke, not as a kid, but as someone who had just taught them something they didn't expect to learn in a place filled with expensive machines. Mr. Delaney looked at the group and cleared his throat. "I hope you all saw what just happened here," he said, his voice calm but sharp. "This boy walked in here with coins, but left with something priceless, not because of the money, but because of the meaning." He turned to the sales staff, the receptionist, and the floor manager. "We talk a lot about value in this place," he said. "Horsepower, leather interiors, monthly payments. But we forgot what real value looks like." He pointed to Mason, who stood holding the certificate of ownership in one hand and the photo of his father in the other. "He reminded us." The staff looked around at each other. Some nodded. Some looked away. The receptionist stepped forward and spoke softly. "I'm sorry, Mason. I didn't see it. I didn't understand." Mason didn't smile or gloat. He just nodded and said, "It's okay. You weren't supposed to understand. It was my story to carry." Her eyes filled with tears, and she stepped back quietly. Mr. Delaney reached out and rested a hand on Mason's shoulder. "Most people spend their lives chasing more. Bigger houses. Faster cars. Flashier lives. But the truth is, the most important things are often the smallest. A coin earned with sweat. A picture kept in a pocket. A car covered in dust that still holds the scent of someone you loved." The room stayed silent. The words didn't need to be shouted. They just needed to be felt. And they were. He continued, "I've sold 1,000 cars in this place, maybe more. But this is the first time I've watched someone buy back a piece of their heart." Mason turned to leave, but Mr. Delaney stopped him. "Wait," he said. He walked to the back of the showroom and opened a small side door. A few moments later, he returned with something wrapped in an old cloth. He handed it to Mason. Inside was a worn, leather-bound notebook. Mason opened it carefully. The first page had his father's name. The rest was filled with sketches, part lists, diagrams of the car, notes in the margins, his father's handwriting. "He left it in the glove box the day he last brought the car in," Mr. Delaney explained. "I saved it. I guess I was waiting for someone to come claim it." Mason clutched the book to his chest. This was more than a car now. It was a message sent through time. As Mason walked out of the dealership, his backpack light, his hands full of memories, the sun was starting to set. The sky turned orange and gold, like it was painting the day just for him. He stopped by the curb and looked back at the building. It didn't seem so big anymore. It didn't scare him. He had walked in a boy and was walking out with something more than keys. He had found a part of himself he didn't know he was missing. He looked at the car once more through the glass. It would need work. A lot of it. But now he had the notebook. The tools could come later. The lessons were already his. Just as he was about to head home, a voice called out from behind. It was Mr. Delaney again. "Mason," he said. "Before you go, there's one thing I never told you." Mason turned. Curious. The owner stepped closer. "Your father didn't just save me. That night in the garage, he pulled me out before the roof caved in. He could have run. He could have saved himself. But he went back in for me. He said, 'My boy needs me. But he'll need you, too, one day.'" I never knew what he meant until now. Mason stood frozen. The wind blew gently as if even the air wanted to hold the moment. Mr. Delaney handed Mason one last thing, an envelope with the dealership's logo. "Inside is a lifetime service pass," he said. "For that car. You bring it in any time. We'll take care of it."
No cherry.
Mason looked down at it, speechless. His voice finally cracked through the lump in his throat. "Thank you." The owner smiled.
No.
"Thank you, Mason, for reminding me why I started this place. It wasn't to sell cars. It was to serve people. And somewhere along the way, I forgot that." Mason nodded once, then turned and began walking home, the key swinging gently from his hand. Behind him, the dealership stayed still, as if frozen in thought. The staff would talk about that day for weeks. Some would change how they treated customers. Others would just carry the memory quietly. But everyone would remember the boy who walked in with coins and left with a legacy. And Mason, he wouldn't tell many people what happened. He didn't need to. Some stories weren't meant to be shouted. Some were just meant to be held close, like a key in your pocket or a steering wheel under your palms. But sometimes, late at night, he'd sit in the driver's seat of that old red car, open the notebook, and whisper to the empty seat beside him, "I'm still making you proud, Dad."